Hello, friends, and welcome aboard. Welcome to Cause TV and the Cause Green audio experience on the podcast. So good to be with you on a Tuesday night. How is your Tuesday night? We're going live prime time tonight. I've got a great guest that has a story that will inspire you. And I want to ask you right now, what is it that lights your fire? What is it that gets your juices going? What is it that makes your passion come alive? Because without passion, we're merely existing. And that's really what makes us different from animals that just run on instinct, and human beings where we can have that passion, that drive, that juice, that enthusiasm. And if you don't have goals and a mission for 2021, well, it's about time you got some. I believe that we need to have at least one major definite purpose. Some call it your mission or your major definite purpose, but we need a focus. I like to say that I believe we also have something divine that actually comes from God. And I remember when I received my call in life, so to speak, and I knew what my calling was. And I'll tell you, when you have your calling, that's when you really have a fire within. And without that fire within, you really don't have persistence. Because what is persistence? Persistence is best defined as the measure of belief that you have in yourself. You see, if you don't believe in your mission, you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe there's really a purpose to all this, then you'll quit. You'll throw in the towel. You won't keep on keeping on when things get tough, because I promise you, the closer you get to your mission, the harder things get sometimes. If it's too easy, then your goal was not high enough. If you achieve your mission in life, then it was probably too simple. I believe it's something you're always stretching for. And as we've talked about on the program, it's all about the journey, not ever arriving at the destination. Our program today is brought to you by our friends at StreamYard. Put the power of live streaming to work for your business, your brand, or your cause. Go to StreamYardCause.com. That's StreamYardCause.com. And put the power of live streaming to work for you today. You could be streaming live like we are tonight to Facebook, to YouTube, to LinkedIn, to Twitter, and the like. So go to Cause Green, or rather, go to StreamYardCause.com, StreamYardCause.com. Sometimes I have way too many domain names in my head, and I'm old. I get confused. All right, you ready for this? This program tonight could very well change your life. My guest is familiar with overcoming hardships. After enduring physical, mental, and sexual abuse, my guest was emancipated at the age of 15. At the time, she was only the second case in the state of Utah for a child to become legally emancipated. While working 3 jobs to support herself through high school, she became a sterling scholar, graduating top of her class. She was an athlete and founder of S.H.A.R.E, an advocacy group for students by students who had experienced abuse. What began as a small group of students supporting each other, S.H.A.R.E has grown and evolved into a 503c national foundation that stands for Sharing Hope for the Abused Through Resilience and Empowerment. She was a torchbearer for the 2002 Winter Olympic Games right here in Salt Lake City. She's always been determined to shine light in dark places, helping others to light the flame within themselves. Now, while most might have used their unfortunate past as a crutch, while most may have used their unfortunate past as a crutch, Tiffany has chosen instead to use it as a stepping stone towards a better future. You ever have one of those days? It's one of those days. As a realtor and real estate investor, she prides herself in exceeding her customers' expectations. She also loves coaching people on how to set up successful Airbnbs to build long-term wealth. Her new book's going to be coming out this year. She told me in the pre-show, it's coming out this year, come heck or high water. And the title of the book is The Throwaway Girl, an inspiring autobiography. Again, coming out this year, look for it. So my guest has made it her mission to help others create real change one person at a time. Her motto is, it's the start that stops you. Through her message, she helps others to begin their journey of resilience and empowerment from adverse circumstances, one step at a time. Friends, help me welcome to the program tonight, Tiffany Barnes. Tiffany, welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Having you read that bio, even though I sent it, I felt like, wow, who is this person? I can't wait to hear.
That's a lot to live up to. And, you just have some of those days where, your tongue gets wrapped around your eye tooth and you can't see what you're saying.
Yep.
That's like right now. Maybe I was just so excited about the broadcast. I wanted to get started and couldn't even get through the introduction. So welcome aboard. It's so good to have you here. I know you're very busy. Give us an update. What's new in your world? Just recap for our audience today, just what you did today. And that'll put into perspective that you're not a part-timer.
No. So my days start early. I have a lot that I do in my business. I don't just do Airbnbs. I'm also a realtor. So I do residential and commercial real estate. And today I got to dabble in both. I have a client that was looking for a space, and we literally had about an hour and a half time to look at almost 4 properties. We ended on the 3rd because they found the one they wanted. But we drove 55 miles in 1 hour, just going from one place to the other, and then had to write some contracts up for some homes and things like that. Not had to, I get to, because I love it.
You choose to.
Yes.
Not fear, not duty, but because you love it.
I do love it.
Emancipated at 15 years old. For those who have to go look up the word, basically you divorced your parents.
Yeah, I had to look up that word actually when I was working with my social worker at the time, and he mentioned that it was even a possibility to pursue an emancipation. I didn't know what the word meant. It seemed like a very scary process once he told me about it, but I thought, you know what? The odds are stacked against me. Why not go for it? And the worst that can happen is the judge says no.
So had you not been emancipated, would you have gone into foster care?
Yes, exactly.
But at 15 years old, you got emancipated. Tell us what led up to that, though. It's not like you just were a rebellious kid and said, I don't want to live under my parents' rules.
Right.
It was a little more difficult than that. Tell us all about it.
Well, unfortunately, from my earliest memory until I was emancipated, I had suffered all forms of abuse. So physical, emotional, sexual, you name it. And my stepfather at the time when I was 13 years old was sexually abusing me, was somebody who was very intimidating, tall in stature, had a very bad temper, to the point that oftentimes my mother would get hauled away in an ambulance when my mom and him would fight. And so he would always threaten me. He said, if you say anything to anybody about, the sexual abuse that was taking place, he would kill me. And at 13 years old, when a grown man says, hey, I'm going to kill you if you say anything, and you see these, scary behaviors displayed against your mother, you tend to believe him. So I kept my mouth shut. And unfortunately, my mother is a drug addict. I say is because she's still a drug addict to this day. She's been a drug addict most of my life and never really took any stock in what was going on in my world, what was going on in my life. And, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, significantly older than my youngest sibling. And I grew up the majority of my life feeling like a paycheck to her, in the sense that she just kept me around for a child support payment so that she could use that for her bad habits. So one morning I was getting ready for school, and I was in the 8th grade, I believe, at the time. And the room that I had was in the basement. And she had come down to my room and started kind of asking what was going on between me and my stepfather, because she had noticed how long it had taken him to, quote unquote, wake me up. And as she's asking me this, I'm thinking, well, this is odd. Mom's never cared what my grades were, what I'm doing, who I'm hanging around with, never really inquired, as I mentioned, what was going on in my life. So I thought, okay, maybe if I did tell her, she would protect me. And then this other voice in my head said, if you say something to her, he's going to kill you. And I just kept hearing those words repeating in my head, I'll kill you, I'll kill you. And so, I kind of had this devil and angel, if you will, one saying, just tell her, and the other one saying, don't, because, there's some very trying circumstances that could happen. And she just kept pressing and pressing and asking, what was going on between us. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to tell her. And I did. I let it all out and said, he's sexually abusing me. This is what's going on. And he was at work at the time. So she calls him home from work, and we had a family meeting around the kitchen table, kind of recounting all of the details. And the entire time, all he could say for himself was, I did nothing. I did nothing. And would call me a liar. And it kind of culminated to a point where he basically told my mother, he said, your daughter's a liar, and you got to choose, Karen. It's going to be your daughter or me. And she didn't even hesitate 3 seconds. She turned to me and said, you have until tomorrow to get the bleep out of our house. So here I am in the 8th grade, tell a trusted adult about sexual abuse that was taking place. And the result is I'm kicked out of my home with really no prospects on where I could go. And the reason for that is because the majority of my family are either abusers themselves, they're incarcerated. I didn't come from a really, we all have dysfunction in our families, but I just didn't have like a ton of options to go to. So as you can imagine, I'm in this like state of what am I going to do? Trying to process the emotions of what just happened, trying to make sense of why my mom chose a child abuser over me. And, there's just so much going on. And I did go to school that day. Came back home from school, didn't say goodbye to friends or talk to any friends. Anybody who actually talked to me was just like, are you okay? I was almost like a zombie, if you will, kind of walking around that day, like in a trance. And I'm walking home from school, and the street that we lived on was on a hill. And I'm standing at the top of this hill, looking down, walking towards my house. And I notice there's a ton of cars coming and going, and people look like they're carrying things, and some of those things look familiar. And I have this little idea in my mind as I'm getting close to my house, maybe while I was away at school, mom had this change of heart and has chosen me, and these people are at my house helping us move. And so I had like a little bit of a spring in my step as I'm getting close to the house thinking, oh my gosh, she finally chose me. She's finally chose me. And as I get to my house, I see that we are not moving anywhere. My mother was hosting a yard sale selling my belongings. I was worth more to her as a dime, a quarter, or a penny for a material object as a 13-year-old at the time than I was as her own flesh and blood child. And that was something that I will never forget. And it's so clear in my memory because, of everything that happened, to have that kind of happen on top was just such a dagger in my heart, if you will. And I had one of those little Tootsie Roll banks, the cylinder-sized Tootsie Roll banks. And I had some money saved in there, maybe $2 or $3. So I walked inside the house, past my mother in her yard sale, grabbed my Tootsie Roll bank and a black garbage bag that you put the leaves in the fall time, and put some clothes in there, and walked right past her yard sale with my $2 or $3 in my pocket and some clothes in a garbage bag, and walked to the local bus stop, not knowing where I was going, who I could call, where I was going to sleep that night. And this was, later in the year. It was end of September, beginning of October. And I'm worried, am I going to freeze? Can I maybe sneak into a lobby of a building? Again, not knowing where I was going to go. So I jump on the UTA bus, which is our local transit system here in Salt Lake City. And I take a transfer slip just in case I needed to hop on a different bus line. And it takes me into downtown Salt Lake City. Well, here I stand, 13 years old, in the 8th grade, staring at these huge, tall buildings, thinking, again, which one can I sneak inside of? Or how can I get a hold of a phone and maybe try to call someone? And then this idea pops into my brain. Why don't I try going to my biological father's house? And he lived up in Layton, Utah, which is about 30 minutes north by car, by bus, with all the stops. It was about an hour and a half drive. So I take my transfer slip, I jump on another bus, and I'm sitting in the back of this bus, my garbage bag next to me. Again, all these emotions I'm trying to process, making my way up to Layton to try to see if I could stay with my biological father. Well, while I'm sitting in the back of this bus, I'm thinking to myself, am I really doing the right thing? Is this the right decision? And the reason I thought that was because from my earliest memory until my parents' divorce when I was 7, my father was very physically abusive to me, to the point that I would be on the floor coloring in coloring books. And him and my mom would get in some sort of an argument. And instead of taking it out on her, he would pick me up and threw me across the room and broke my arm or my collarbone or bloodied my nose. And so I was really worried, am I exchanging one evil for another? And that was something I really was worried about. But I took my chances. I showed up, told him why I was there. He let me in. And that kind of began my journey in kind of the darkest point I've ever had in my life. And the reason for that is because I spent a lot of time alone. Because Dad took me in, he had to take on a second job. Well, because he took on a second job and he also rode the bus to and from Salt Lake City, so it was a lot of time sitting on that bus, I became a latchkey kid. So again, I'm dealing with this emotion of mom kicks me out. I try to tell a trusted adult, am I in the right place? Like, is Dad going to hit me? Luckily, he wasn't that same person. But spending that much time alone was the worst thing that I could have been through, because I didn't have somebody to talk to. I was left to my own devices, and I became anorexic. I became suicidal. I thought, if the person who brought me life, my very own mother, doesn't even want me, what's the point of living? And so I made several attempts to end my life. And there was this one morning I woke up and I said to myself, today's going to be the day. Today's going to be the day I end my life. And then I had this other voice in my head that says, well, if you do that, who's really winning here? You're letting this defeat you. You're so much better than this. It was kind of that devil and angel once again coming into my life. And I realized it was time to get help, because if I didn't get help, I was going to end my life, and I was going to be not on this podcast or writing books or be able to do any of the things that I've done that are so amazing to me in my life. And so I reached out to a friend that I left back home when I was in the 8th grade living with my mother, and said, her name was Amy. And I said, Amy, this is what I'm about to do. These are the thoughts I'm having. This is kind of where I'm at, mentally. And she said, just promise me when I call you back, you will be there to answer the phone. And she went and she talked to her parents and kind of told them what I was going through. And they let me stay with them temporarily while I was getting help with a social worker. And it took me 2 years, from 13 to 15, of a lot of counseling to get myself right here and here in my heart. To not be disgusted by the person that I saw in the mirror every day. To not think that I was disposable or a piece of trash, or, just again, to have love for myself and realize I am worthy to be alive. And that began my journey into emancipation. So I know that was like a 10-minute answer, but that's how I came across becoming emancipated.
Well, this is all about you and sharing your story. I can't imagine being 13 and being thrown away.
Yeah.
You said you have never forgotten. Were you able to forgive?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Forgiveness is key. It's been key to who I am today in the healing process. I'm a really firm believer that if you don't forgive, it's like a cancer in your body, so to speak. It's a darkness that you carry around with you, and it does nothing but kind of hold you down, if you will. So I've forgiven my mother. I've forgiven my father. I've forgiven my stepfather. I've forgiven those people that have abused me in my life. Because again, if I don't, it's kind of like the darkness is on me. They're not suffering. They're going about their lives. It's just self-inflicted suffering for myself. I guess that kind of is a double entendre there. But to not forgive and to not say, they had their own pasts, and we know that abuse is cyclical. And I've later learned in life that my mother went through some abuse when she was a child. And my father came from a very unloving home. And so, I'm not here to excuse what they did, but I'm here to break the cycle with me, right? I'm here to say it can end with me. And they didn't have that strength to say that about themselves in their life.
Where did you find the courage to stand up to all the authority and request from the state of Utah that you be an independent, emancipated person, to be an adult?
Right. I was motivated by foster care. I did not want to go to foster care. And here's the biggest reason why. I went to 23 different elementary schools growing up, some of which I went more than once. My mom would put me in a school for a month and then check me out. And then I'd have to go make new friends at a different school. And then she'd break up with that boyfriend and we were back to the old school. So I was never really, there was maybe one time in elementary school, I believe it was the 5th grade, that I stayed at a school the entire school year. And that was because I demanded I stay with my grandmother because I just didn't want to be bounced around anymore. And so I kind of equated that bouncing around or that bouncing period in my life to being a foster kid. I knew that when you go into foster care, it may not be the same home. You may not like the people you're with, and it was so foreign. And I had walls up. I didn't want to have to, trust again or, I don't know, just put those walls down, if you will. And I knew I could trust myself. And so the biggest motivator for me, as odd as it may sound, is I became emancipated because I just really didn't want to bounce around and go into that foster care situation.
But who guided you through that?
A social worker.
Okay.
Yeah. So the social worker said, okay, you've got one of two options. You can go live with a foster family, because I didn't really have family I could go stay with. I mean, the situation with my dad was fine in a sense, like he wasn't abusing me anymore, but he just couldn't be there for me, having to work the jobs and keep up and things like that. And so it was foster care, or he said, you can do an emancipation. Again, I said, what's an emancipation? I didn't know what it was. And he kind of explained it to me and what the process would be. And I thought, again, well, what's the worst that can happen? They say no. And again, I was just praying to everything out there that I wouldn't be told no, because then the alternative was foster care.
So walk us through the process of just going before a judge and saying, I'm 15 years old, but I can be on my own.
Yeah. So at the time, my first job, I worked at Kmart in the shoe department. So I can legitimately say my first job, I was an Alice Bundy. But I was working at Kmart in the shoe department. So I showed I had a steady job. I was already paying, bills of sorts, kind of had a plan in place, I guess you could say, that I was going to rent an apartment of some sort. I had another friend of mine that was considering to do an emancipation. We thought about moving in together, but she was further behind in the process. And I just basically stood before him and said, here's my plan. I'm a straight A student. I'm not somebody who's out there being a hoodlum in a sense. And I'm making my own money. And here's what I plan to do. And he said, okay, I grant you an emancipation. And I had these papers I had to carry with me everywhere. Because you can imagine when I go knock on somebody's door and say, hey, I'm here to rent your basement apartment. At this time, it was 16, because it was near the tail end of my 15th year. So I was just about to go into 16 years old. And I knock on this couple's door and I'm like, hey, I'm here to rent your basement apartment. And they're like, what? Like they were being punked or something. And I had these emancipation papers. I was like, I know this seems weird. I'm my own legal guardian. Here's my papers. I'm not a runaway or anything like that. And we negotiated $500 a month for this basement apartment. And it was on the other side of town. So I went to Kearns High, which was out west. And this apartment was near the University of Utah, near the east side of the valley. And I did that because I knew I eventually wanted to go to the University of Utah. And I didn't want to, again, bounce around. So I was kind of forward-thinking and paid $500 a month my entire high school career. and ended up graduating with honors, as you mentioned, a full ride scholarship to the University of Utah for leadership. And yeah, I made it work. I figured it out.
So with all this going on, because now I look back and I'm like, what excuse did I have? Right? When I was in high school, why was I not an A student? But different strokes for different folks. Even with the problems at home, where did it come from for you to not only be an A student? I mean, you were a Sterling Scholar in which category?
Family and Consumer Studies.
I mean, that's just unbelievable to be a Sterling Scholar under those circumstances. So, I mean, I honor you today for what you were able to do at that time in your life. Imagine in a world today, I just see so many young people that are that age that you were at that time, and there's just so many excuses. You didn't find excuses. You didn't make excuses. You took responsibility, took control of your life. That makes you unique and rare in today's world at that age. You're totally self-sufficient and independent. So I honor you.
Thank you. That really means a lot. There's a lot of people that come to me and say, how, why, you didn't have somebody telling you to get out of bed and make your bed or pay your bills or brush your teeth or go to school and all those things. And I really equate it to this one thing. When I became emancipated at 15, I made myself a promise. And one thing I really pride myself in, anybody watching this, anybody who knows me will tell you, I am a person of my word. I feel very strongly about that. My word is my bond. And this promise I made is that I was going to live the rest of my life to be everything that my parents were not. So my parents were high school dropouts because they got pregnant with me. My mother was on drugs. I didn't want to be on drugs. I saw a lot of times my parents didn't pay their bills and, we were dodging people. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to be the exact opposite of everything that they are. I wanted to be a homeowner. My parents still don't own a home to this day. And I thought, wow, I want to be exactly, again, the opposite. And so I really prided myself in that. There was an article that was written about me in the Salt Lake Tribune, which is our local newspaper here. And it was published the day that I graduated high school in the year 2000. And one thing that they mentioned in this article, they interviewed some of my teachers, kind of like, hey, was she like every other kid? Did you know she was going through this stuff at home? Kind of interviewing their perspective. And one of my teachers, Miss S.H.A.R.E, she made a comment that I had attended my own parent-teacher conferences. There were kids out there that were saying they're hiding the letters, the notices that they're supposed to send home for their parents to know there's parent-teacher conference. And here I am showing up on my own behalf, sitting in front of my teacher saying, how am I doing? How can I improve? And I remember she just commented how blown away she was by that. And I really did take so much stock in myself. I really prided myself in making good grades, being an honorable person with integrity and things of that nature. But the biggest thing for me too, I really excelled in school because I knew, especially as a little kid, even when I was going through abuse, my parents couldn't take that away from me, or at least I thought. I thought school is the one, refuge I have. When I'm at school, I'm not getting beat. I'm not getting sexually assaulted, all these things. And so school was just such a solace for me. And I really thrived on hearing teachers say, good job, or here's that A. It was kind of my positive reinforcement that I got from grownups that I didn't get in a home life, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. I'm just amazed where you found the courage and strength at that age. That's just phenomenal. So pick up the narrative. You went to the University of Utah. You got your degree in what field?
I actually dropped out on a full ride scholarship to pursue real estate. Don't do this at home, kids. So I talk about this in some of my workshops I do, but
please tell us about that. What do you now give then from experience?
Yes. So I was on a full ride academic scholarship, meaning I couldn't get anything less than a certain grade point average. And I was waitressing at this place called Frontier Pies. I don't think they're around anymore. But I had a regular that came in and would always request me. And I noticed that he was always talking real estate. And so one day I got some gumption up and I said, hey, his name was Matt. And I said, hey, Matt, what do you do for a living? I hear you're always talking real estate. He'd come in with cufflinks and, suspenders and dress very nicely. And he says, well, I'm a real estate investor and I'm also a mentor. I show people how to invest in real estate. And I thought, sweet, I've always wanted to get into real estate. Like, can you show me how? And he said, yeah, I'll show you how, but I charge $10,000 for my mentorship. And then all of a sudden it was like deflate, right? Everything just kind of went away as far as thinking I could ever pursue something in real estate. And I stewed on that for a little while. I thought, oh, so I guess this saying it takes money to make money is true. And I don't have any money. I'm using this money I have for tips tonight to get me back home, gas in the car. Or, I lived on kidney beans and saltine crackers for weeks at a time sometimes. And so I thought, I'll never have $10,000. That's just such a crazy amount of money. And I believe it was 3-4 months later, he came in. And again, I'm kicking this around in my brain, and I said to him, I said, you know what, Matt, I don't have $10,000. And I've been thinking a lot about what you said. But what I do have is time. And time is valuable, right? And he's like, well, yeah. I said, how about this? I will volunteer my time and do everything you don't want to do. I'll make copies. I will make you coffee. I will vacuum floors. I'll drop off dry cleaning. Anything you don't want to do to relieve your pressure and stress, if you'll just let me be around you. Because I knew birds of a feather flock together. If I was just around him and I picked up a little crumb of the big pie that he had, I was going to make it. And so I did that for 6-7 months. I just volunteered my time on top of full class schedule, having to carry this certain grade point average. I think it was nothing less than like a B or a B plus, still having my jobs and everything and making time for him. Because I knew it would eventually show my work ethic and show that I was serious about this and maybe he'd take a chance on me. And he did. He showed me how to do my first real estate transaction, which was an assignment of contract. I made $3,000 or something like that. But to me, that was like $3 million. Like, I just was like, what? $3 million? Are you kidding me? Or, $3,000. I said million. That's what it was at the time. But the next deal I made like 4,000. And then it just started like lighting my fire in a sense that I was going to school to get a communications degree. I wasn't going to school to be a lawyer or a doctor or something that needed that certification. And unfortunately, my grades started slipping and dipping because I was so focused on making this money over here that the dean sat me down and said, we got to put you on probation. You are going to have to get your grades up or you're losing your scholarship. And so I had this kind of come to Jesus meeting with myself, if you will. And I said, okay, do I pursue this degree that I fought so hard to get the scholarship, or do I drop out and pursue real estate investing? I dropped out and pursued real estate investing, and I've never looked back. I've been so fortunate that I became a millionaire at a very young age before I was 30 years old. I own several properties here in the valley, long-term and short-term rentals. I've done fix and flips and private money lending, and kind of the person in my family that if you had to say somebody made it, I guess you could say I made it in a sense. I still have so much more to grow and learn and do. But given my circumstance, I bet a lot of people wouldn't suggest that I would have come as far.
No, not at all. And you know what? I'm grateful you were vulnerable to say, hey, I made a choice to not go to college and I pursued my career. And you have done amazing things in the world of real estate. You've got a great brand, personally and professionally in Utah, I know, and just kudos. And you can be proud of yourself, and there's nothing wrong to have pride in your accomplishments in coming through so much. And as you said, you never used it as a crutch. You never suffered from excusitis. You figured out a way. So at a young age, you figured out a way. It was all about results, not just process, right? You just didn't put in the hours of Frontier Pie just to make $5 an hour. You saw the big picture and you went after it.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest lesson as you now look back at that time in your life? What's the biggest lesson? Give me one word that would summarize the great lessons of your childhood through all that. What's the big word?
If I had to give one word, it's my favorite word in all of our entire language, and it's resilience. I really just, I don't know if I have a special chip inside, or I don't know what it is. I get questioned about this all the time, and I just have something inside of me that refuses to accept no for an answer. Even now, that's what's made me successful in real estate is I've gotten creative. If somebody turns down an offer, I find a different way, or I find another solution. I know you mentioned my quote, it's the start that stops you, which I need to trademark that. I want to. It's so true. Anything in life, it just starts with a single step in a certain direction. I took that step towards emancipation. I didn't know what the end result was going to be, but I took that first step and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm alive. I didn't die. I'm not eating out of garbage cans. Let's take one more step and another. And then you just build this momentum into whatever it is your vision is, your goal is, to empowerment, to fuel your fire, whatever it is out there. It's about being resilient, but also having the wherewithal to take that first step.
What advice or counsel would you give to someone that would be listening today, or to a parent that is working with a child that's that age, that's seeking some self-responsibility? From your perspective now, what would you say to a parent or a young person who might be listening to the program? What would you share with them? What's a nugget they could put into action?
Man, like I say, it's the start that stops you. Keep that momentum going. But also, I think the biggest key to obviously even saving my life is listening.
How so?
Sometimes, if you're a parent out there and your kids are coming to you and you're so busy with life, or you think whatever they're dealing with is so insignificant, maybe they're being bullied at school or certain things are happening and you think, oh, that's nothing, I went through that. Still listen, because if they feel they have nothing, or no one, and everything they're talking about is just falling on deaf ears, that's where kids are turning to suicide. Or, they feel so alone, they don't feel that they can go to somebody and they're going to listen. I had that teacher I talked about, Miss S.H.A.R.E. I remember one day I just kept her after school and just kind of let it all out and just talked to her about how I was feeling. And she could have been like, oh, I got to go, I got to grade papers, or whatever the case may be. But she listened to me that day. Same thing with when Amy picked up the phone and I said, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm about to do. The listening doesn't cost anything. It's just sitting and listening to the other person, not chiming in and telling them they're right or they're wrong. Sometimes people just need a soundboard, somebody that they can say, this is what's in my head, I need to get it out, and just tell someone. I did that a lot through writing as well, which is kind of what led me to the Throwaway Girl. I had so many journals, and I named my journals, Dear Aubrey, and just got things out of my head, because things, they get stuck up here and they're just constantly going around like a washing machine or a dryer. And there's no healing in that. You've got to get it out. So if you're a kid or a parent, I'd say talk and listen.
You obviously had to come to a realization at that time, early in your life, that no one was coming to the rescue. And that if it's to be, it's up to me. If it's to be, it's up to you.
Right.
So you got to that point. You also had to get to a point where you trusted and loved yourself. How did you get there, though? because your parents didn't show that they valued you. You didn't have it, but somehow you gained it. How did you gain that trust and value for yourself?
I'm going to say it's a work in progress. As I sit here and give this interview, there's still things that I'm working on as a person, to still love who I am and who I see in the mirror. And it's something that I'm still going through therapy. I'm 38 years old. We're talking about over 20 years ago, all of this happened, and I'm still in therapy. And sometimes it's more needed than not. And sometimes, I can go a year without having to have any sessions, but it's just recognizing when those limiting beliefs come up. For an example, I've really nurtured a relationship with my biological father, the one I lived with, when I was suicidal. And I have this thing with my dad that I'm still like waiting for him to tell me he's proud of me. And he's never told me. He's maybe told me he loves me a handful of times in my life. And so I'm always trying to like one up myself. Like, well, maybe if I run the Olympic torch, he'll tell me he's proud of me. Well, maybe if I buy him a brand new Subaru Legacy for Christmas, he's going to tell me he's proud of me. Maybe if I take him to Hawaii to see the ocean for the first time, he'll tell me he's proud of me. And I've been doing all these things. And people are like, are you kidding me with what your dad did to you growing up? Why do you keep giving and doing all these things? And I still have this complex, I guess you could say, of I'm waiting for my dad's approval. I'm waiting for him to finally say, I'm proud of you, kid. I'm proud of what you've done. And it's something I'm still working on today.
What was your relationship with your siblings after you got emancipated? You said you were the oldest of 4.
Yes.
Where did the other 3 end up in this story?
So I have one sister and 2 brothers, pardon me. My 2 brothers are mentally handicapped. My mother did drugs when she was pregnant with them. They have varying disabilities. One's more severe than the other. For a while, I was raising my brother Trevor. He has since gone back to Florida to kind of live his life there. My sister, I took her out of foster care. She ended up going into foster care. She was molested by her dad, which is my stepdad. So if my mother would have stopped it with me, Tristina wasn't even born yet. She would have never had to go through the same thing I did. We ended up prosecuting my stepfather, by the way. Once I was reunited with my sister, found out she was in foster care, and found out why, we went and tried to see what we could do to not only prosecute on her behalf, but if we could somehow override the statute of limitations for what had happened to me. And they let me testify on stand, and there were too many similarities, and her and I had been separated pretty much her whole life. And so he was prosecuted and went to the Utah State Penitentiary to serve a sentence. I believe he's since been released. But I raised her to the point that she's now got 2 beautiful kids. Her birthday is next week. She'll be turning 30. And she actually named her daughter after me.
That is just so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Sorry, I'm a big baby when it comes to things like that. I'm just touched. So touched by your story.
Thank you.
You can be proud, so proud of yourself. I mean, it's just coming from a very peripheral friend, but and it's not your dad, but I'm proud of you. I'm proud to know you.
Thank you. That means a lot. It really does. Sometimes I will say one of the bigger lessons, you asked me this earlier, as far as myself, is I can be very hard on myself. I hold myself to a very high standard. And I can catch myself holding other people to the same standard. And I got to realize, well, that's their life, not my life. I have what I call CDO, which is OCD, but the letters have to be in order. So I'm just I grew up in such a chaotic environment. I mean, you can't really tell from the background here, but like my house is very tidy. My business is very tidy. Like I grew up in such a chaotic environment. It's kind of my way of having control as an adult. And so if I were to talk to myself as a young girl, now at 38, what I would tell myself is go easy on yourself. You don't need to be so hard. Sometimes I'll do something. It's kind of like with my book, why it's not out yet. I'm like, oh, it's just not ready. It's not perfect. And I've had to learn that present makes perfect. Being present in the moment, not some idea of, your every hair has to be in place or every word in a book has to be perfect. That's something I still work on and have to deal with.
I'm interested. How did you pivot during COVID? Because a lot of your income, a lot of what you were doing was connected to Airbnbs.
Yes.
Were these Airbnbs you owned, or you were helping others purchase Airbnb properties? And then how did you pivot during COVID? Because I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, a little bit of both. So what I did, as you know, with Airbnb, it's a travel industry, right? It's driven by travel. And so at the beginning of 2020, nobody was traveling. I went from being booked a year out to losing almost every booking, with maybe the exception of 10%. So I lost about 90% of my bookings. And so I thought, okay, well, who's still traveling? Somebody's got to still be traveling. And I thought, okay, traveling nurses. Let's see if there's some sort of a website for traveling nurses. So I came across a website called Nurses B&B. Threw my property up there immediately. Other people were like, who would want to have a nurse in their house that could be exposed to COVID at this time? And I said, they're human. They need a place too. They need a home away from home. They might not want to stay in a hotel. And really kind of looked into, with my cleaning companies, what could be done for disinfecting and how long it could live on a surface. So how long did we need to give between somebody checking out and then the cleaning crew going in so they weren't exposed? And then also, with my background in real estate investing, but also now as a realtor, I know that something that's kind of a problem, which I like to provide solutions, is that, people might be in between buying a home. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in 2020, people were out there buying homes more than before COVID ever hit. Mm-hmm. I believe Utah right now is number 4 in the nation for appreciation. We're appreciating at about 1% to 2% a month. So, people were not only doing home improvements, but selling their home, purchasing a new home, and the numbers just kind of went off the charts. So I started soliciting to brokerages and saying, hey, if you know somebody, one of your clients, that is selling a home and they need some time, like a month or a month and a half before they can move into another home, if there's like a lag time, I'd love to host them in my Airbnb. So I started getting people that were staying for 5 or 6 weeks at a time, and that really filled in those gaps of losing bookings.
And you also help people do that too, correct?
Yes. Yep. I just had a client close on an Airbnb yesterday, as a matter of fact.
That's powerful. And what are you telling people about the market right now? I'm just curious. This is all about your story, but since we've got you here,
I would say buy now, don't wait. And the reason for that is, if you thought you were going to get into a certain house 6 months ago, look at where prices are today. As I mentioned, in Salt Lake City alone, we're appreciating anywhere from 1% to 2% a month, depending on where, at a low scale, 1% a month. You look at that, that's 12% a year. That's insane, and so it's only going to keep going up. Houses that I bought in 2007 here in Salt Lake City for $240,000 are now appraising at $360,000 in 3 years. It's gone up that significantly. So if you want to get into real estate or Airbnbs or just getting into a home for yourself, now is the time.
Tell us a little bit more about S.H.A.R.E. What is your mission there?
Yes, S.H.A.R.E, near and dear to my heart. Started in 1998, as you mentioned. When I was in high school, we started it as a support group. So I was known in school as the girl with the special circumstance. And the reason for that was because I could check myself in and out of school. Literally, I remember I was taking Spanish, and it was like my 3rd period of the day. And for some reason I was late, and I wrote myself a note, please excuse Tiffany Barnes for being late. Thank you, Tiffany Barnes, and handed it to the teacher. And, kids would chime in, that's not fair. I got to write, I can't write my own notes. I've got to have mom or dad sign off on it. And so kids would come up to me and say, why do you get to write your own notes? What's the situation? Did your parents die? Why are you living alone? Some thought that that was so cool that I didn't have supervision. And what they didn't realize was I was too busy being an adult like their parents, right? I had to make ends meet, and I didn't have somebody, here's your cereal, or, here, let me make your bed or whatever. But they'd come to me and I'd share my story. I'd say, I was abused and I was emancipated. And so I'm my own legal guardian and I live on my own. And it was like they were starting to come out of the woodwork, meaning my peers were coming out of the woodwork saying, I know somebody who's being abused, or I myself am being abused and I've never told anyone. And that was kind of what I call my Tiffany epiphany, where I said, this is the reason I didn't take my life. I am meant to be a catalyst for others to realize they too can overcome abuse. And so I started a support group called S.H.A.R.E. And S.H.A.R.E at the time stood for Students Helping the Abused React and Empower. And that's what we did. We taught each other how to react in a positive way, in a resilient way, if you will, and in turn empowered each other so that we weren't, turning to teenage pregnancy or drugs. I went to Kearns High School. It was a very, it was very diverse, I'll say. So, yeah. So we just decided we wanted to support each other, and now it's grown into a 501c3 nonprofit.
That is fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about the book, and then we'll head to the home stretch.
Cool. So my book is called The Throwaway Girl. Kind of an interesting title, but it really embodies who I felt I was growing up. I felt that I was disposable to my parents. I felt that I was a piece of trash, kind of apropos with that trash bag sitting next to me on the bus riding to my father's house. So it's not a story of, woe is me, or, just let's get out all this depressing information about abuse. It's about overcoming and sharing a story of triumph and hope. And the whole reason I wrote this book is because I wanted to have another platform to get my message out. I was giving a presentation. I think I was 18 or 19 years old. And this is a little bit right before I ran the torch in the Olympics. Dan Clark, who's a very well-known author, he approached me. I didn't know who he was, and he had just seen me give a motivational speech, and he said, you need to write a book about your life. And I thought, who's going to read a book about my life? And he said, no, I'm telling you, you need to write this book. And so here I am 20 years later at 38, just finally at a point to release it. It's been in progress for 20 years. And so I just wanted...
It's been in progress for 38 years.
True, for 38 years. But I'm doing it, as I mentioned, as another modality to get out my message, a platform, if you will. But I've decided that the majority of the portion the proceeds rather, from the book will go right back into S.H.A.R.E, the nonprofit, because that's what it's about.
That's awesome. That's a very, very worthy mission for S.H.A.R.E. So
Yes.
we just had it up there just for those watching, for you listening. It's sharethemovement.org, sharethemovement.org. Who should get involved with S.H.A.R.E?
Anybody. We're currently looking for more volunteers, adding some people to some committees. If anybody wants to donate their time on a committee or even join the board, if they want to donate time, money, energy, resources, we are all for it. The more, the merrier.
Tiffany Barnes, I just met you, but I sensed your greatness. And I am so grateful that you came on tonight to share your story, to share your mission, to share your experience, to share all the goodness that you have. There are so many golden nuggets and poignant principles that you've shared tonight. So thank you so much for being here tonight. It's just a pleasure and an honor to know you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those kind words. And thank you for what you're doing with your show, letting people highlight their stories and what they can do to make a difference. I appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. And we all have stories, but we don't need to be our story. right? We can
Right.
rise above whatever it is we've gone through. I like how you said that because, we all have the fun in the dysfunctional families, but we can't use that as a crutch. We need to rise above that, to light our fire within and be the very best that we can be.
Yeah.
Again, Tiffany, author, speaker, realtor, Airbnb investor, and the list goes on and on. Thank you so much. And for all of you out in the audience tonight, keep smiling, shine brightly, because someone out there does need to be guided by your light. Your light.